Halito, and welcome to Native ChocTalk, a podcast by natives for all. Here we're keeping our Native ancestors' stories and history alive, while also sharing with you our Native culture, traditions, and more. I'm Rachel Youngman, a Choctaw originally from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I hope you'll enjoy this journey with me as we learn from our Native American guests. And I hope you'll do me a favor. Feel free to like and share these episodes. I so appreciate it. Yakuki.
Running isn't more important than their faith, their family, and our life. I believe that my sole mission in life, no matter what I'm doing, I should be an ambassador for Christ. He knew that when I turned 40 years old, I was going to start running and using this as a ministry. I've seen it through the people that he's brought into my life as a husband, as a father, as a runner. I've just seen it each day, how he's going to use this for his glory.
See and share our stories at togetherwe'remore.com.
You're listening to part 2 of this series.
When it comes to, did you say it was University of Alabama and they repatriated some of their remains? What happens to those remains from there on out? Are they displayed? Are they reburied? What happens
No,
to
so
them?
they are not displayed. The idea is we do not want any type of photography of these. We don't want them displayed. There is a certain level of care and that you have to wrap them, lighting. A lot of them sometimes are removed from mountains, burials, so it may be something of reinserting the remains into a burial that is in line with that family's, spiritual beliefs or religious practice or cultures or whatever that may be. And so the goal is to just bring them back and put them to rest. So it's, never to display them. We really try to keep very strict rules on what education happens. Another good example to kind of, I think, unpack this would be with NAGPRA, as we talked about. The idea is that NAGPRA applies as a federal law that would apply within the exterior bounds of your reservation. So let's say someone calls and says, "Hey, I have found what appears to be a grave site right near this, what appears to be a cemetery, but it's within the reservation." Okay, so who gets called? Typically, if it's a criminal matter, you want the chief medical examiner's office to come down because it's criminal. They're going to do their proceedings, do the investigations they need to. But if it's not criminal, then what law kicks in? NAGPRA will kick in because it's not criminal. It is, well, it's a burial site. But how do we determine if it's criminal or if it's just a historic burial? So the idea is we don't know that as uncharted territory, but we don't want people coming in and doing destructive analysis right away on things because then that is against what is culturally appropriate for certain tribes. And so now you're trying to figure out what that uncharted territory looks like. So it's the idea of, okay, hey, instead of calling, the state, include the state historic preservation officer, but also include the tribal historic preservation officer. You have state archaeologists that will come down and do any surveys or investigations that you need. Bring the Choctaw tribal archaeologists because those tribal archaeologists, they will have more knowledge in Choctaw history in the area. So there'll be a little bit more focus there that's important. And so there's not this, hey, we need to come first, but we need to be at the table at the same time. Because if it is criminal, you take it. That's your jurisdiction. We have that figured out and cross depths and all that stuff. You take it, you do what you need to do. But if it's historic in nature, then that becomes our jurisdiction. We get to do with it what we want.
Absolutely.
And so it's kind of navigating those situations. Yeah.
So interesting. So what legal tips do you have for Native American artists who sell online, thinking like contracts, trademarks, copyright, all that?
Absolutely. So the first thing I would advise an artist to do is to go to their tribe and see if they have an artist registry program. I know the Choctaw Nation is starting to develop that program, and the idea is that you can get them registered for authentication purposes, so you get some protection to make sure, hey, this is being put out there that it is native made, it is native owned. We get to verify it, we get to authenticate it for you. Then it gives you opportunities to, you know, be on different of registry in the sense of vendors can come find you and your name gets put out there to kind of promote your business. And a lot of times I would advise, if you're looking into contracts or if you're contracting with a tribe or with any other business to sell your work, I would really read the contract. And I know a lot of times we say, "Oh, I've read it," but really look at the fine-tooth details because what you want to make sure is that they're not taking your right away to reproduce that. You can give them the rights to use it, to remake copies of it, but you want to make sure that you maintain the full rights to that property. You just want to give them a right to use. Um, and that is to kind of protect, and it depends on right the artists want. Some might want to say, I'm developing this fully because I want them to promote it. I don't need any interest from it. That's completely fine. But if
Right.
you do, just kind of be mindful of those conversations and don't be afraid to negotiate because I think, in most tribes, they want to protect the artist and give the artist an opportunity to flourish. And so they're open for those conversations and don't be afraid to negotiate because it is a balance of trying to protect the artist
Yeah.
and to, recreate and get the story out there. And so there is, I think, a mutual effort there that you can really come up to something that would be for your best interest and for the best interest of making sure the art goes out and tells its story like it needs to. Um,
Interesting.
with respect to copyright and trademarks, I am not the legal expert on exactly those processes and stuff, but yes, I would, if you are looking and that matters to you, and that's your work and it's great, yes, do it. I would always encourage, go talk to an attorney. It's not me that you would probably want to talk to, but I could point you in the right direction of someone, and I can get that context of historical preservation and cultural, importance, to those conversations. I mean, advocate on that behalf. So there are a lot of things you can do. Just put yourself out there, reach out to your tribe, see if there's resources that can promote you, and then don't be afraid to go ask questions and talk to an attorney and see, kind of make sure your goals are aligned with what you need and what legal protections you need there.
Highly recommend that because if you have created something that you are trademarking, copywriting, whatever it is, obviously you've worked really hard on that for someone to be able to just come in and swoop in and completely copy what you're doing. Again,
That was
this is more than just protecting our materials. It's protecting our Native American created materials. We are a minority. So
yes,
let's protect what we can while we can, because there are very few of us left in this at this point, right?
1000% correct. Yes.
Well, that's good info. I know our people always have practical questions that come up to the everyday what ifs. So let's run through a few things folks might be wondering about. Here goes. All right. So, can tribal members use their tribal IDs as an actual ID?
So it is the real ID does not specifically mention tribal IDs. And so the real ID was something that was in 2005. It was after 9/11. And so it was an effort to increase protections. And so, now Oklahoma's going into implementing it. Tribal IDs, although it is not explicitly listed, it is used as an alternate form of ID. Meaning, so if you want to go travel, fly, you would go to you can use it like just like a passport, like you would a military ID. Sometimes, I've heard of tribal members having issues not being able to use that. And I think maybe the issue lies in there's not a barcode that you can scan. And so people are like, oh, do you have another
What do we
ID?
do with that? Yeah.
What do I do with that? But if you look on TSA's website, it does say where it says military IDs, passport, it does say a federally recognized tribes citizenship card or tribal ID. And so you can have that list ready and say, hey, this is here. And the Choctaw Nation has a BIA approved list. You'd pull that up and say, hey, Choctaw Nation or whatever tribe you are, here it is, and they should let you go. So it's not as a replacement for your state ID, but it can be used as an additional form of ID at a TSA to fly or things like that, where you could use a passport or military ID.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been following a couple of people because I was looking into this myself just out of interest.
Yeah.
Uh, on TikTok, there are some people that are tribal that have used it to go through,
Yeah.
TSA and to be able to go through security. And it has worked. One gal was saying though that she had to, they had to call their boss over, the agent, because she was like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm not saying you're doing the wrong thing, but I have to get
Yeah.
my manager to approve it.
I'm getting ready to go through TSA with my tribal ID because I never got the real ID because I'm just that way, I guess. I try to do better, but I never got around to doing it. So I'll let you guys know how it goes. Just kidding. I won't make you wait for like a whole entire other segment on this. It worked pretty okay. It worked well. The ladies were really kind. They had never done like a tribal ID. She's like, we don't get them very often, so just be patient. So when you use a tribal ID, if your tribal ID can't be scanned, they take out this book and they have to go and double check that your tribe is listed on that federally recognized. And I've had people be really rude to me about it in TSA, but most of the time they're pretty kind. But you have to tell them that there's several rows of tribes because they think it's just one per page row.
And so I think if you're going to use it, I think you should use it. Go a little bit early, have some time, so that way, because you may have to, it may not go quickly as you want, because you may have to stop, and they may, in this instance, have to call a manager over and things like that. But I think if you use it as an education piece and you have those
Yeah.
screenshots and stuff ready, I think it's doing some good because it's the education that people need. Because so often, unfortunately, with just the news and just the way the kind of government works in general right now, we don't always get the best um source of news, or it's not always the best, like, all the details are out
Right.
there for you. So you just have to spend some time to kind of have those conversations. And so
Agreed. And just personal opinion here, little advice. I feel like we should represent Native Americans and our tribes respectfully and properly and show people what we're all about. We're
yes,
giving them the opportunity to learn something about IDs and what is legal and what is not. So I hope that if you're using it to go through the security at the airport, that you will be kind and respectful to folks
yes,
and have another ID available just in case you do run into troubles and you
you're in a
know
hurry.
yeah, you're not in a hurry. Exactly. It's like, am I willing to go through this right now?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So another question. Can a person be enrolled in more than one tribe? For instance, I am Choctaw and I'm enrolled as a Choctaw, but I am also part Creek. Can I enroll in two different tribes?
So you cannot enroll in Creek while being enrolled in Choctaw. Choctaw is very specific in that you can only be enrolled at one tribe at a time. Now, I think that is each tribe has the ability to determine its membership rules. So it's not a one size fits all. Multiple
Yeah.
tribes may have, I would say a lot of the Oklahoma tribes, the five tribes have a lot of the same type of rules, but that's not all tribes in the United States, right? And so membership can look different to each tribe. They call this the Certificate Degree of Indian Blood, CDIB, they call that the Vanishing Act because the idea of it, right, was used as a tool for assimilation. The less Indian blood you have, the more white you were, the better you were, and so that's why a lot of people didn't want to sign the Dawes Roll. It was just there's all this huge just assimilation connotation behind it. And so there's really no kind of act that really talks about the CDIB. It was kind of just something that was put into place by the BIA. And for so long, it has been used for a lot of tribes to prove Choctaw by blood or whatever tribe by blood, because we would use the CDIB as proof of that lineal descendant. But you don't have to. Tribes do not have to use the BIA. Tribes do not have to use the CDIB as a way to authenticate lineage. The tribe can choose what they want that to look like. And so, for example, the way the Choctaw Nation works is they will help you, and most tribes memberships office do this. They will help you apply for the CDIB, but you have to be granted the CDIB from the BIA before you are granted membership with the Choctaw Nation because they use that to show you're Choctaw by blood. But there's no
Yes.
requirement that any tribe has to. And so you get to kind of, there's this, you have the ability to determine your membership. But with respect to your specific question, Choctaw is you can only be enrolled in one tribe at a time.
That's interesting. And then for some folks who may be non-native or aren't a member of a tribe, and so maybe they don't know some of those details, there are some tribes that do go by blood quantum. If you are under a quarter blood, you are not part of the tribe. You might even be, say, Comanche or whatever, but you're not allowed to be a member. Whatever. I'm just, making up different tribal
No, it
names.
is. Yeah. Yeah. And it's very,
So
and a lot of it is kind of linked to, it's a hard conversation for tribes because it is,
it is.
do you want to expand and kind of is this growth with the idea of knowing that this idea of blood quantum, which wasn't a tribal thing, tribes didn't really quite care about blood quantum. Um, it was something that was put on by the BIA, this blood quantum of again, the more native you had, the worse you were, and the more white you had, the better you were. It was just to use as an assimilation tactic, but inherently tribes just start adopting that at a certain point when they made membership decisions. And so Do you want the tribe smaller in the sense of where we say, hey, these higher blood quantum requirements, and in those tribes that do have smaller tribes, they issue what's called a per capita payment. So a lot of times, I've had questions of tribe members call and say, well, you have the casinos. Why am I not getting my money? And I can see where this question comes from though, because tribes do it differently. There are some tribes
Yes,
that
yes.
where they see them getting this monthly check from their tribe, but it's because their membership is established differently, right? And their government's set up a little bit differently. They have maybe smaller members, less members because their blood quantum is higher, and they issue these per
Hmm.
capita payments, or where like Choctaw Nation, we use the money to fund into member services programs. And so then your membership will qualify you for those programs that you can be eligible for. And so it's just different
Absolutely.
ways. As a government, you have the ability to set up differently, and just tribal governments are not, not the same either. They're different. And so they get to choose how they want to operate.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it is kind of a funny thing. And, if someone finds out you're tribal, and if, let's say, you're Choctaw,
Yeah.
and we know that there is no money tree, but Choctaw Nation takes care of its own. That money that comes from casinos and other places goes to help the elderly, to provide opportunities for jobs for our tribes people. It's not, it's that teach a man to fish scenario with the Choctaw Nation, where with other tribes, it's like, well, here's the money we made from our casinos, as you mentioned, the per cap, so we're going to divide this amongst our members. And so and that makes sense too, if you think about when it comes to diluting the blood level, there's more money spread more thinly, or
Yes.
like, so there's less and less money for each tribal member. So yeah, it's a very sensitive topic. And I think if people have questions, you're welcome to reach out to me, and I'll try to get you the right answer from one of our experts that I've interviewed between yourself and
Yes.
others. So
Yes, for sure.
well, I have a big question for you. So this one we might have to narrow down exactly by
Okay.
topic, but when does tribal law apply versus state law or federal law?
Absolutely. And so I think it will come from two different perspectives, right? You have from an individual capacity, and then you have from a government capacity. My experience, and McGirt, when we talk about criminal, that's I think what really a lot of people are talking about is criminal, what laws apply, and then also kind of civil, what does that look like? So I know a big case. I haven't seen anything on the news, but I haven't been following the case closely. I'm not sure if Oklahoma Supreme Court has released their decision on taxes on, do you, if you work for your tribe, you're Native American and you're within your reservation, do you have to pay state taxes? And so
Hmm.
these are big things that are coming after McGirt. And so it kind of depends, like I said, on the two individual lens. From a government perspective, when you're talking state law, tribal law versus federal law. As a government, a tribal government, state law does not apply. We do not have to abide by state law because it's this idea that we are a domestic dependent nation. And so, a lot of times it can be confusing and think, okay, well, Choctaw or a tribal seems like a race thing, like, and it's not. And because of we're identified as tribes are identified as a political entity or political class. And that's because of this coined term, domestic dependent nations. And we were governments here existing before the United States was set up. There were, so we're within the United States, but we are independent in that we are not the equivalent of a state. We are more than a
Okay.
state. But the federal government has that relationship of that of a guardian to its ward, meaning they have a responsibility, a trust responsibility to us in the sense of that protection, right? And to help us kind
Okay.
of get on our feet and do what's right because we can't tax. We didn't have the ability to tax. So that's where casinos and compacts come in, is because the government has to be funded somehow. Where do you get the funding? And so
Right.
it's the federal
Right.
government's responsibility to kind of help put in those mechanisms to get us to those points to build our governments based on this trust responsibility. And so we say state law doesn't apply because we are that domestic dependent nation. We are kind of above a state. We are not to be the same as a state. So, but then we have federal law. Okay, so federal law is kind of the guiding, law, but federal law is not always decided. So a lot of times we have these laws of what are called laws of general applicability, meaning like OSHA. Does
Hmm.
that apply to tribes or not? Well, the different circuit courts have said differently. The 10th Circuit is very tribal friendly. They say, nope, it does not apply to tribes. So what that means,
Okay.
tribes, is what rules are we going to put in place to mirror OSHA? What mechanisms are we going to do for workplace safety and things of that regard if we don't abide by the federal law? And there are other times, like environmental laws, where The federal government says, we're going to pass these laws, but it's never our intent to just enforce all of these laws in the states. What we want to do is create the EPA. The EPA is then going to allow the states to do the kind of the heavy lifting, but they will be a resource and they will kind of guide and come up with the regulations around what that looks like.
Right.
A lot of those federal laws never mention tribes. Some of them don't, some of them do. How do you handle that? And so it's a different game. I don't say game because I think of it as a puzzle, and that's where I have to say bridging the gaps. You have to figure out and say, okay, what inherent authority do I have? What authority have I had since time immemorial? Then where is Congress, what's the Constitution say? Does our Constitution have the tribal Constitution have any limiting factors? Does the United States Constitution come into play here? It could if it references treaty rights. It could if it references due process rights. And then you have to
Yeah.
look at congressional action and say, how has Congress limited the tribe's ability to and exercise its sovereignty? And so then you have to bridge the gaps and say, okay, state law doesn't apply here. Federal law is unclear over here. So I'm going to have to enact law here to kind of bridge the gaps. And so
Oh my
ideally, it's
goodness.
basic federal and tribal law is what governments apply to. They don't apply to states. Individuals, it is a criminal law has been very clear. Civil law is kind of up in the air right now after McGirt, but criminal it's kind of made clear when state law and when tribal law applies and when federal law applies. It's
Oh
not
my
so clear
God.
about civil.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So those people that have gone to, OU, for instance,
Mhm.
has that tribal law class or degree or whatever, and those people that go into that, I mean, they're truly, that is a specialization into, I mean, they also have to know our own, the governmental laws, the federal government laws, and then they have to learn that on top of the native laws on top of federal. I don't even see, I can hardly even talk
It's
about it
so
because
confusing.
it's
But
so
what I hate
confusing.
the most though, is that it is not as complicated as the state is making it sound right now. They are making
Okay,
it sound like it is so scary and that it's just a mess. And now, mind you, is there going to be growing pains? Are we going to figure this out? And are there things that
sure.
we need to figure out? Absolutely, that's completely normal. But McGirt's really not that confusing. And the state makes it seem like, I hated this Facebook post that said there was a speed limit. It said tribal speed limit, 170 or something
Oh my
dramatic,
God.
a
That's not,
lower.
I've been stopped by the tribal police. That is not true.
That is not true. No. And the idea is, okay, hey, just like we have county and state courts, okay, well, you add tribal courts to the mix. And
Yeah,
so if I get pulled over, and let's say I got pulled over in Bogue Cheeto. It was
right.
not a tribal cop. The idea is he can pull me over easily. I was speeding. He can cite a citation. He asks, am I tribal? I say yes. So that just means he sends my ticket to tribal court rather than sending it
Okay.
to Bogue City Court or Bryan County Court, he sends it to Choctaw Nation Court. And so just how like city and county has its limits,
Yeah.
tribal's the same thing. And so justice is still
Good
being
point.
served. The murderer is getting arrested. If a cop tells you, I can't arrest you because you're tribal, that's scary because he should be able to arrest you. That's why we have cross steps. These cross deputization agreements allow justice to be served and the people to be protected. And so you
Yeah.
can make these arrests and do all these things you need to do, but your day in court is either going to be in tribal court or is it going to be in Bryan County Court or is it going to be in Bogue City Court? And so it just kind of determines where your day in court is. But the great thing that what I love that tribal courts do with these cross deputization agreements is they give a big lot of because the idea is of money, right? Where do these money for these tickets go? How do you split up
Oh,
the
good point.
and so so if it's a non-tribal agency and they make the arrest or give the citation, a large portion of that ticket goes back to that county or that city. And
Okay.
so yeah, and so tribes are very big contributors into to the cities and the municipalities. And so it's working. I mean, there's kinks to figure out and by every
Sure.
nation, but it's not meant to divide us. It's just meant to figure out where your day in court is. But justice is still going to be served.
That's why in the gushy side of me loves it when Choctaw Nation has made great strides with the outside community, not just the community of just their members. There's a lot that they're doing in roads and water and all kinds of things that helps the non-native communities. And I think that that goes a long way to help those relationships when the tribe and the state and local government have to work together. I wish that our governor would be a little bit more friendly
Yes,
towards, but that's another story.
that's another
So
story. Yes, for sure. For
and by
sure.
the way, we've mentioned McGirt a few times. We will talk about that in just a moment for our listeners. A question for you: how does adoption work inside tribal law? Perhaps we could just talk about, Choctaw Nation in this case.
So, I have not ever, I don't have personal experience in adoption law cases, but it generally works just like it does in the state court. I mean, you have the adoption laws are very similar, if not almost identical, to how the state process works. The idea with tribal laws, you can add a little bit more cultural protections. You can add a little bit, and that's good, right? You want to be able to add more of
Yeah.
the culture, more of things that are important to your government system that may not be in the state system. But however, for ease of access, it is primarily the same. So the same kind of legal proceeding you would follow in a state court proceeding, you would follow in a Choctaw court proceeding. And so a lot of times it just kind of, if you have the foster parents, the foster program, it just kind of takes that extra kind of path,
Okay.
kind of navigates you into tribal court and stuff, too. But yeah, you can go to tribal court, you can go to state court, wherever you want.
Yeah.
The process is pretty much the same, I'd say.
Very much the same. Okay. I was asking partly for my own reasons because when my daughter graduated, Alex, my daughter, when she
Yes.
graduated from high school in 2017, we had moved to Texas and I was having that empty nest,
Yeah.
thing going on and wondering, I'd always worked, but now like I felt like I'd lost a second part-time job, or a second
Yeah.
full-time job because, your kids are a full-time job as well.
Yeah.
And I just missed her so bad. My heart was just aching. And so I called the tribe at the time. So again, this was in 2017 to ask, about adoption because I was like, I could adopt anyone that's of any age because,
Yeah.
sometimes the older kids are harder to adopt and all that. And so I was like, I survived one teenage gauntlet. I can do
You
that again.
can do it again. Yeah. Oh,
So
that's
we called
awesome.
and but they were like, well, you live in Texas, so you can't adopt. And so I even
Oh,
called the Mississippi Band of Choctaw to ask the same thing. And I was like, I understand it because they're like, we want the kids to be near their
yeah.
culture. And but
Yeah.
then when I kind of got past that feeling of, okay, I just delved deeper into work and,
Mhm.
still have the empty nest syndrome many years later today. But at the
Yes.
same time, at the
I,
same
my
time,
mom's like, I don't know
I
if
know
that'll ever go away.
no, right. It's just the pain is just,
Yes. You just learn to
it's
cope.
so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just fill it with something else as best you can.
Exactly.
I'm sure other moms out there can relate and
Yes.
dads. I remember I was interviewing Kara
Yeah.
and Chief Batten one time, and I just mentioned it. And I was packing up my stuff and about to leave, and I mentioned, "Oh, I really wanted to adopt at one point," and he was like, "Oh, it's open now. The adoption you can adopt and not be in this live in the state of Oklahoma." And he was like, "You could start that process." I was like, "Well."
Life is taking a
Thing
turn.
now, but right, getting really tired and older and but if I had been able to adopt at that time it would have been a wonderful experience but I am also saying this for folks that are Choctaw tribal members that if you do live outside of the state and you're really wanting to open up your home for a Choctaw child I highly recommend looking into it and working with the tribe and seeing if you're eligible. Yeah, okay, so that's interesting. So if we had gone through that adoption, we're able to adopt a child living in Texas and from a Choctaw child that's in Oklahoma, adopting that child. It sounds like we could have worked with the tribe and with the state,
Yes, and I
most
would
likely.
at that point, yeah, you would go, if you wanted to adopt a Choctaw child, I would really probably advise going to the Choctaw courts at that point, because they can help you with the Choctaw foster care system. And so but yes, I mean, if you
Yeah.
had, let's say that you had you had already kind of had a Choctaw child that you were wanting to adopt, and you kind of have a
Okay.
mechanism for it in state court, you could go to state court, but like ICW would be involved still, because they need to make sure in the sense of, okay, this is because when it comes into a point to where there is, a native child, they just want to make sure the idea coming from the boarding school era and the idea of children were ripped from their native
Oh,
families and taken away.
absolutely.
So the ICWA was enacted to say, hey, okay, we're going to make sure that children are placed if there is a possibility for their culture to stay intact or whatever means that needs to be. And that's not the legal jargon. There's legal jargon that
Yeah.
is more accurate, but the concept is then we're going to make sure that can happen. And so when adoption and things like that happen, ICW will apply, and so they'll need to make sure they're taking best efforts to make sure, like, is there someone more suitable that's maybe Choctaw that they can go with? We'll consider
Yeah,
that. But
for
it's
sure.
also hard concepts too, because you have to see the importance of ICWA and why it was established. But I understand, some of the times of what's in the best interest of the kid, and they may have connections in one area, and so there's a lot of things to consider. But
Totally.
it's really important to kind of just make sure to understand the reason why ICWA was created and the
Yeah.
remedy that it's trying to affect and the culture that it's trying to preserve. And so you have to see it from that lens of, hey, we're doing best efforts here for this reason. And again, I'm no ICWA expert, but general premise of kind of what that would look like in an adoption proceeding.
It shouldn't be a selfish thing when you're wanting to adopt a child. It should
Yeah.
be what's best for the child overall, and good points.
Yep.
Stay tuned for part 3 of this series.
Thanks for listening to Native ChocTalk. Be sure to join our community on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check us out at nativechoctalk.com. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to love it. Yakoki. Thank you, my friends.